5 lives lost in just over a minute after takeoff. A respected doctor, his family, a sunny July morning in Myrtle Beach, gone in an instant. From the ground, people thought they saw a failing engine, a plane that just couldn't climb. But the truth? The truth was far more unsettling. The airplane wasn't broken at all. No, this tragedy came down to one mistake, one decision, made before the propeller even started spinning. It was July 2nd, 2023, just after 11 a.m. at Grand Strand Airport in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The airport is practically at sea level with a nearly 6,000-foot runway, plenty of length for most general aviation airplanes. Conditions were sunny, visibility was great, and the winds were calm. On paper, a perfect flying day. The airplane was a Piper PA-32R300, the Lance. A single-engine retractable with 6 seats, popular with owner pilots because it can haul a lot: people, fuel, luggage. Dr. Joseph Farnese, a 66-year-old New Jersey physician and longtime Lance owner, was at the controls. With him were 4 passengers: 32-year-old Tanique Shu, her 7-year-old son, Sean Gardner, 17-year-old Odacia Edwards, and her mother, 42-year-old Suzette Coleman Edwards. They'd flown down a couple of days earlier for a family vacation and were heading back north. From the start of the takeoff, though, it didn't look right. A golfer near the airport later said the plane sounded muffled, not as strong as you'd expect from a 300-horsepower engine. More worrying, the Lance wasn't climbing. The nose was pitched up, but the airplane was barely gaining altitude. Surveillance video from the airport confirmed the same thing. The Lance lifted off, but instead of building a strong climb, it just hung in the air, nose high and struggling. Then came the critical moment. Instead of continuing straight out, the pilot began a shallow right turn. That's when the right wing abruptly dropped, the airplane rolled off, and it descended steeply into a wooded area next to a golf course. The impact tore the right wing off, and the post-crash fire destroyed the fuselage. To witnesses, it looked like a textbook engine failure and stall, a sickening sight. But when investigators arrived, they found the real story was something else entirely. When the NTSB dug into the wreckage, they were expecting to find a mechanical smoking gun, but there wasn't one. The Lycoming IO540 engine turned over freely. All the cylinders had good compression, the spark plugs showed normal wear, and the magneto was still producing spark. Fuel was in the lines, the injectors, and the pump. No blockages, no contamination. The propeller showed impact signatures consistent with power at the moment of crash. In short, this engine was working. There were a couple of curiosities. The fuel selector was found in the off position, but investigators concluded that was likely caused by impact forces. And the landing gear? The wreckage showed the main gear was extended while the nose gear was still retracted. That mismatch creates drag, and drag at low altitude is a performance killer. But even that wasn't the heart of the issue. The real findings came from the numbers. The investigators pieced together weights from the passengers, luggage, and fuel, and what they found was damning. At takeoff, the Lance was about 54 pounds over its maximum gross weight of 3,600 pounds. That might not sound like much, but it's not just the weight. The center of gravity was right at the aft limit, meaning the airplane's balance was pushed to the very back of the safe envelope. And then you add the weather. The temperature was 30 degrees Celsius, about 87 degrees Fahrenheit, with South Carolina humidity. That pushed the density altitude up to nearly 2,000 feet. That means the airplane had to perform as if it was taking off from an airport at 2,000 feet elevation, not at sea level. Less thrust from the prop, less lift from the wings, less climb rate. So what looked like an engine problem from the ground was actually the airplane doing exactly what the numbers predicted, struggling to fly because it was overloaded, tail heavy, and flying in thin summer air. The official probable cause? Loss of control after takeoff, made inevitable by operating the airplane beyond its limits. And this is where things get really frustrating, because the real mistake wasn't in the cockpit, mid-flight. It happened before the propeller even turned. Here's the real kicker. The fatal mistake wasn't some botched maneuver in the air. It was a decision made on the ground, and it comes down to weight and balance. Now, most pilots think of weight and balance as annoying paperwork, but the reality is, it's the math that decides whether your airplane is going to perform or not. Let's break it down simply. When you're over gross weight, your airplane accelerates slower, eats up more runway, and climbs like it's dragging an anchor. Add an aft center of gravity, and suddenly the airplane feels twitchy in pitch. It doesn't want to settle. Worse, stalls get nastier. The FAA makes this point crystal clear. An aft CG reduces stability and can make stall recovery nearly impossible. But it wasn't just weight and balance. There was the environment. Density altitude, something a lot of casual pilots underestimate, is the invisible killer. Hot air plus humidity equals thin air. Thin air means your wings don't bite as hard, your prop doesn't pull as strong, and your engine doesn't make its rated horsepower. On that day, the airplane was effectively taking off from a field at 2,000 feet, not a runway, just 30 feet above sea level. And here's the really frustrating part. None of these factors alone might have doomed the flight. 50 pounds over gross by itself, maybe still manageable. A hot summer day, pilots fly in that all the time. But when you combine them, a little overweight, CG pushed too far aft, and a thin air environment, you end up with performance margins that collapse into nothing. The airplane doesn't just fly worse. It stops flying safely at all, and that's the trap. The mistake was letting all of these little oversights stack together before the airplane even left the ground. And as if that wasn't enough, there are a few deeper traps that might have made things even worse. First, the gear system. The Piper Lance originally came with an automatic gear extension system. On paper, it was a safety device. If you slowed down below roughly 85 to 105 miles per hour, the gear would drop automatically. Sounds good in theory, but in practice, it caused all sorts of headaches. Imagine this. You're already fighting for climb performance, your speed is marginal, and suddenly the gear drops and adds drag. That's the last thing you need when you're hanging on the edge of flight. We don't know if that system was still active in this particular Lance. Some owners disabled it years ago, but if it was, it could have been catastrophic. Second, technique. At heavy weight and high density altitude, you can't afford to yank the airplane off too soon. If you rotate aggressively, you're just skimming along in ground effect with a nose-high attitude, bleeding away precious energy. Combine that with an aft CG, and you've basically set yourself up to hit critical angle of attack almost instantly. Third, the turn. Any pilot knows. Banking increases stall speed, and at that low altitude, with the airplane already in a razor-thin energy state, even a shallow bank was enough to push the wing over the edge. With the aft CG, recovery wasn't just difficult, it was impossible. And here's the truly crazy part. If you look at the performance charts in the pilot's operating handbook, the numbers don't seem terrifying. They promise a decent climb rate at sea level. But those numbers come from ideal test conditions. Factory-fresh airplanes, flown by test pilots. In the real world, with 5 people, summer heat, full tanks, and a few bags, the climb rate isn't just lower, it's marginal. And once you burn away those margins, you're gambling with physics. So, why would an experienced pilot, a man with over 1,600 hours in the exact same airplane, fall into such a trap? This is where the human side matters. Dr. Farnese wasn't a reckless novice. He was a respected physician, a longtime owner-pilot, and he'd flown this Lance countless times before. That's exactly why this accident is so unsettling. Experience bias is real. When you've flown heavy, hot, or with a full family before and it worked out fine, you start to normalize the risk. It feels routine until the day it isn't. Then there's planned continuation bias. This was a family vacation. Everyone was packed, ready to leave, probably eager to get home, stopping to reweigh bags, offload fuel, or, heaven forbid, tell someone they couldn't fly would have been awkward, maybe even embarrassing. That's how subtle social pressure creeps into decision-making. Not malice, not ignorance, just human psychology pushing you to go, even when the margins are whispering don't. And that's the lesson here, for pilots and non-pilots alike. Aviation is brutally unforgiving when it comes to margins. Weight and balance isn't busy work, it's survival. Density altitude isn't just a number, it's the air you breathe and the lift you ride on. Turning at low altitude isn't a casual choice, it's a gamble with stall speed. The takeaway is simple but powerful. Run the numbers every time. Don't guesstimate. Adjust for density, altitude, and real-world weather, not just what the book says. Delay any turns until you have a solid, stable climb. And never brush off a little overweight, or just near the aft limit. Those little margins, when they line up, are killers. So in the end, it wasn't the engine. It wasn't the airport. It was one decision, loading the airplane just a little too heavy, with the balance just a little too far aft on a hot July day. That decision cost 5 lives. And if there's one thing to remember, it's this. In aviation, the math is not paperwork. The math is survival. And if you thought this case was unsettling, stick around. In the next video, I'll show you another accident where the true cause wasn't what anyone thought at first, and the discovery is just as shocking.